What is up, YouTube? Before I get into the video, let me remind you that if you like my videos, please hit that like and subscribe button. And also, if you want to be notified as they drop, please hit the bell icon. And finally, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all of this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. All right, today I want to take a look at a deck tech for Rulik Mons Warren Chief. This was a Dominaria United commander, and it caught my interest because I didn't want to build a mono red Goblin tribal deck. They're just kind of boring. But if you do, you pretty much run either Krenko, Tin Street Kingpin, or Krenko Mob Boss, and kind of just crank out a bunch of Goblin tokens. And this isn't that different, but it does allow us to splash another color. So Rulik Mons himself is a 3/3 menace. Whenever he attacks, you get to look at the top card of your library, and if it is land, you can put it on the battlefield tapped. And if you didn't, you get to put a 1/1 red Goblin creature token into play. So this isn't too different. We are still going to be creating a lot of Goblin tokens. So let's take a look at how we're doing this. Starting with all of our token generation, we have Krenko Tin Street Kingpin. As it gets bigger, it cranks out more Goblin tokens. We have Mog Marshal. Goro, Disciple of Ryusei. This one's not going to crank out Goblin tokens, but it will create Dragon tokens. And there are ways to modify your creatures both with +1/+1 counters in here, as well as equipment, and we'll get there when we get there. We also have Beetleback Chief. Pashalik Mons, who not only creates tokens, but has an ability that sees goblins dying and deals damage to any target. And then he can double up. If you look right here, sacrifice a goblin, create 2 red goblin creature tokens. So you can sacrifice one of your goblin creature tokens and get 2 instead, but it costs 4 to do so. We have Krenko Mob Boss, probably one of the best token generators in here. We have Squee Dubious Monarch. This guy will continuously come back from the graveyard and is just a really good card in here. 2/2. We have Krenko's Command, a spell that just creates 2 goblins. This is interchangeable with Dragon Fodder, or you can run them both at the same time. It doesn't really matter. We have Battlecry Goblin, which has an activated Anthem effect that also gives haste. But on top of that, sees 6 power and creates goblins. We have Legion Warboss that also creates goblins on attack. And then we have Goblin Instigator, which just enters the battlefield with another goblin buddy. To fill that out, we also are running quite a few anthems in here. Starting with the OG, Goblin King. This is Oracle texted to Goblin Lord, but he doesn't see himself. We have Quest for the Goblin Lord that helps to increase power. We have Goblin Trashmaster, which both acts as an anthem but also destroys artifacts. We have Hobgoblin Lord, which not only acts as an anthem but also deals a tremendous amount of damage depending on how many Goblin tokens, or just in general goblins, you have in play. We have Domri Anarch of Bolas. This is a anthem as well as a way to create some extra mana. So you can cast creature spells, or really anything. The -2 isn't something that you're likely to use in here, just simply because a lot of the creatures in here are going to be very small power. We have Goblin Chieftain. This gives anthem effects with a +1/+1 as well as haste. We have Runevelt Hordemaster, another anthem, as well as an ability to kind of what does it say again? Whenever Runeville Goblin you control dies, exile top card of your library. Yeah, if it's Goblin card, it allows you to keep playing Goblins. We got Shared Animosity, which is probably one of the best anthems in here. It only buffs power, but it buffs power based on the number of creatures that are attacking that share the same type. And since we are running Goblins, these can get really out of hand pretty quickly. And then finally, we have Bortusk Legion. This is a card that you would not be able to add unless you were able to splash green. So in a mono red deck, you're not going to see this, where Rulik allows you to do something like that, as well as something like the Anarch of Bolas in here. So this is one of the reasons why I like this build, because it can be a little bit more versatile with the color pairing. Next up, we have two goblins that, well, we have a goblin and a half that allow us to look at the top card of our library and do some sort of thing with it. In this case, it allows you to play goblin spells from the top of your library, as well as give itself abilities. So we have Conspicuous Snoop. And then we have Realm Walker as well. And when this enters the battlefield, you can have it... it already counts as a goblin, but you can choose a creature type, and then you can look at the top card of your library at any time and cast the chosen creature type from the top of it. So it just allows you to utilize the top card as well as your hand. And along with those, we're also going to have ways to fetch out goblins. We have things like Goblin Matron, which just basically tutors a goblin into your hand. Goblin Recruiter, which allows you to stack your deck with goblins, depending on how you want to cast them, I suppose. We have Muxus, Goblin Grandee, which allows you to put a ton of goblins into play, hopefully, which you can combo off with the Recruiter by setting up for Muxus, and also gets bigger with the number of goblins in play. We have Goblin Ringleader, which is another one of those look at the top couple of cards, then grab some goblins. And then we have Warren Instigator. This isn't looking at the top card or fetching anything. What it allows you to do is to play goblins from your hand, basically for free. And it's just a really fantastic card. And then we're going to have a bunch of things that allow you to gain haste. It's really important in this deck that we have haste. Some of these cards we want to activate immediately. Things like Krenko, both versions of Krenko, Warren Instigator, stuff like that are really important to get your value out immediately. So we have Goblin War Chief that not only reduces the cost of goblins, but also gives them haste. We have Rhythm of the Wild, which gives you the opportunity to give haste. And if you don't need the haste, then you can get the +1/+1 counter. So this is a great way to get that modification that Ryusei is looking for. And then we have Fires of Yavimaya, also giving your creatures haste. And for off-chance reason, you can sacrifice it to give target creature +2/+2 until end of turn. And then finally, we are going to round out the remaining parts of the goblins, specifically the creatures, with things like Vexing Shusher, again, a card that you wouldn't be able to add into a mono red deck, which gives a really cool versatility to the Rulik concept here. It keeps you from having to worry about getting countered. Yes, Domri Anarch of Bolas has that ability as well. But it's just nice to have, especially if you're playing against blue, a great way to protect your creatures from those counterspells. We have Goblin Chirurgeon. For 1 red, you get an 0/2 that you can sacrifice goblins. So sacrificing goblins in here with Pashalik Mons in play helps to do incidental damage. And then on top of that, this regenerates target creature. So you can regenerate your more important creatures by sacrificing some of the tokens. We also have Skirk Prospector, another one where we're going to be able to sacrifice goblins to create red mana. And that just helps to bring out some of the more nasty stuff in the deck. We also have Grumgully, the Generous. This is yet another card that you would not be able to play in a mono red deck. And it sees non-human creatures and modifies them, basically. They enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. That's something Ryusei is going to see. And in general, just makes your goblins that much more deadly. It really does allow for some versatility that a mono red deck just doesn't have. We also have Togo, Goblin Weaponsmith, another way to modify your creatures. This is the way it reads is basically landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to create a colorless equipment that is called a rock, and you can equip it for 1, and you can tap 1 and the creature to sacrifice the rock to deal 2 damage to any target. So great for incidental damage, great for modifying, and just in general, a really interesting card to throw in here. And then finally, we have Goblin and Archomancer in here. This just reduces the cost of green or red spells. This will help reduce the cost of Rulik Mons, as well as quite a few other cards in here, not just Goblins. Then we got a spell suite going here. This includes some enchantments as well. Starting with card draw, most important part of most decks, especially in Commander, we have Shamanic Revelation. Just allows you to draw a lot of cards for for the number of creatures that you have in play, as well as if you manage to get that Ferocious trigger, you're going to gain some life too. We have Faithless Looting, a great way to draw cards, loot basically, and flashback. We have Skull Clamp. This is a fantastic way to utilize those 1/1 tokens for extra advantage. We have Thrill of Possibility, another one of those. Well, this one's not looting, this is rummaging, but still a really good card. We have Owlbear Shepherd that sees 8 power and lets you draw cards at the end of your turn, and is also a goblin. And then we have Lifecrafter's Bestiary, both of which you would not be able to run. So Owlbear Shepherd and Lifecrafter's Bestiary, you wouldn't be able to run in mono red, and these are fantastic ways to draw cards. This one allows you to scry, so if you need to set up your next couple of turns, it's just a really fantastic card. Whenever you cast a creature spell, we're playing tribal decks, so we're going to be casting a lot of creature spells. So just in general, very good. We also have a spot removal. This is going to be single target usually. Destructive Revelry allows you to destroy target artifact or enchantment and then deal 2 damage to its controller. Just a really cool way to get rid of some of those enchantments. I would focus it on enchantments. There's a lot of ways in here to destroy artifacts, and there's actually a lot less ways to destroy enchantments in here. But you can use it however you want. It also is red-green, so wouldn't have been able to be used. You would have been stuck with things like Vandal Blast. And while I don't run Vandal Blast in here, I don't think I might. I don't know if it's necessary to run it in here. We also have Wilt, another destroy target artifact or enchantment. We have Chaos Warp, a great way to get rid of a permanent that's causing problems. There is a chance it'll come back, but at least you got rid of it for a temporary amount of time. We have Beast Within, another way to destroy permanents and give them less value with 3/3 vanilla. And then we have a Braid, another great way to destroy an artifact or just deal damage to a creature. Next up, we're going to look at some incidental damage things. We have Impact Tremors. We want to get as much value out of our goblins as possible. This is going to see creatures enter the battlefield and just deal 1 damage to everybody at the table. Just a really great way to start rounding out the game. We have Goblin Bombardment. Your goblins at this point with Bombardment on the table are going to deal damage no matter what your opponents try to do at that point. We got Goblin War Drums for evasion. It gives your goblins menace. I guess it's just attacking creatures. Yeah. Attacking creatures you control get menace. And then we have Caterwauling Boggart, which gives your elementals and goblins menace. Obviously, there's no elementals in here, but at the same time, it gives goblins menace. So any amount of evasion would be great. Next up, we're going to take a look at some incidental spells that just are really good in this deck. We have things like Return of the Wild Speaker. It allows you to draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, which is not exactly the greatest thing in here. If you have Muxus and a huge amount of creatures in play, then this can be really powerful. But really what it's in here for is non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. It is an overrun, and it can cause, especially with Menace on the table, could cause a shutout for the game. We have Brightstone Ritual, which sees tons of goblins and creates red mana for that, so you can just flush out your hand that way. And then finally we have Blasphemous Act. This is going to be the only board wipe in the deck, and because we're playing tribal, you do not necessarily always want to have a lot of board wipes in your deck. Your opponents are going to be put into a position where they're going to have to board wipe. So this is just kind of an incidental in case type situation. And then finally, because we are in green, we actually can run a ramp suite, which helps us ramp out faster than our opponents. And because we're playing goblins, we're not really looking at high casting costs. I think Muxus with 6 is the highest in here. And this is just going to make it so that you can cast a ton of stuff every turn. So starting with Kodama's Reach, we also have Cultivate. They're basically the same thing. We have Harrow in here. We have Sprouting Goblin, yet another creature in here. Goblin, if you kick it, you get to search your library for a land with a basic land type and put it in your hand. I'd like to point out that it says basic land typing. It does not say basic land. So you do not have to search for a basic land with this card. You just have to find something that says, in this case, Mountain Forest. Next up, we have Nature's Lore. We have Farseek. And we have Rampant Growth. A pretty standard suite of ramp in here, as well as our little kicker goblin to help curve out our deck ASAP. And then also we're going to take a look at rocks here. There are less rocks because they're not as necessary because we have the ramp suite. We have Arcane Signet, we have Groll Signet, we have Soul Ring, and we have Talisman of Impulse. And then finally, well, not finally, we're going to look at non-basic lands, and then we'll look at the basic lands. For our non-basic lands, it's pretty standard. We have our Crowd Land. We have our Fetch Land. We have our Check Land. We have Den of the Bugbear, which is a type of man land that turns into a 3/2 goblin that also creates 1/1 goblin creature tokens. So we're looking at creating more tokens this way. Command Tower. Cinderglade, which is another check land. We have Castle Embereth, which allows us to give our creatures +1/+0, all of them. So just another way to create more power amongst our creatures. Crag Crown Pathway. This is the Modal double-sided card. We have another check land. Path of Ancestry, which allows us to scry through our deck if we play goblin creatures. We have the Pain Land. And we have the Shock Land. Pretty standard suite of non-basic lands. And then finally we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 forests, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 mountains. So that's going to be the Rulik Mons deck. Like I said, I didn't want to build a mono red deck. You could find deck lists for mono red decks for goblins everywhere, and they're a dime a dozen. I wanted to do something that had a goblin tribal theme to it, but was a little bit different. And while I admit that this isn't necessarily too far off the mark from a mono red deck, the green gives us a lot of interesting new interaction that a mono red deck just doesn't have. Does it make it more efficient? I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. I think a Krenko deck, a well-made Krenko deck could outpace this. Even a Krenko deck in this same league could probably outpace this. But it's still a fun deck to play with. It was an interesting commander to look at, and I hope you enjoy it. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. And yeah, until next time, guys. Peace.